welcome to our program, Women to Women. I am Carol Paz, your hostess for the program, and we certainly hope that you enjoy the featuring of women from Northern Nevada. We would like to thank our sponsors, Carpa Nevada LLC of Carson City and Villa Bas Deli and Cafe of Carson City, home of Pete's famous chorizo. And now it's a pleasure that I welcome Carol Howell, our guest for tonight's program. Carol, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
I know that you're a very special lady in many ways because I know that you are looking out for the best interests of people with what you do. And I know that you don't happen to be from Nevada originally. Can you fill us in on where did you come from?
Well, I was born in Nebraska, but I spent most of my childhood in Southern California. Traveled the United States a bit and have been a resident here in Nevada since 1994. So almost 20 years.
I know a lot of people know you, they know about your work, so I'm sure that regular native Nevadans would accept you as one of them.
I hope so. I'm going to stay.
Thank you. Carol, you have also been a woman of careers. I know on some personal levels that you have really traveled the United States, not only because of your husband and perhaps his background, but simply because you are an adventuresome woman in many ways. What are some of those careers that you have been in which led you eventually to the passion that we're going to talk about?
Well, I guess the first one would have to be hairdressing. I was raised by a mother that owned 3 beauty shops.
Remarkable.
Thought it was responsible for her 12-year-old daughter to learn how to sweep up hair and make phone calls. So I started in the beauty business very young. Went to school beauty school while I was still in high school. In fact, graduated beauty school before I graduated high school.
We would call that precocious today.
Yeah, probably. That lasted for a few years, and my sister wanted to go in and do something new called computers.
So you were influenced by a sister.
I went because she wouldn't go by herself. So I went to school with her and got very interested in the computers and ended up, after a couple of years of key punching, putting the little holes in those old-time cards. We're talking early 1960s. Then I went into the computer room and started running the computers themselves.
So that early childhood sense of responsibility did carry over, and also I would say that sense of adventurism with your sister, stepping forward with her, family support, but also making a difference in your own vision of what you were capable of doing. You kept moving on from one level of responsibility to another with people.
Something I learned very young. I was the oldest of 4 children.
Okay.
A single mother. So I kind of took the reins very young. And yes, I tried things. I enjoyed the computers until our sons were born. I stayed home with them for a few years until they got into school. And by then the computers that I had known, of course, vanished, and there was a whole new world.
Yes, definitely.
So I went from there into escrow, real estate.
This would have been in what state?
California, Southern California. Owned an escrow company for about 18 years in Southern California.
Lots of business knowledge there.
Lots of training, lots of experience, lots of work.
And working with people as well.
Oh, very much so. Not only the employees, but it was a constant turnover of clients and customers, and of course...
And learning to work with the public.
Oh, that, yeah. And I started that at 12 years old. So I just kind of carried that forward.
But you can see a pattern, so to speak, of people orientation. You're happier when you're communicating, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes one with a group, but definitely your passion shows early in life that you're willing to serve others, you're willing to work with others, and you're willing to learn from others. That's very important. Yes, you do not have a closed mind. Well, were there 3 careers or were there more than 3 careers?
No, there was another. When I basically burned out after working 7 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day for 18 years. We closed the escrow company during a bubble burst in the real estate market. And my husband went into trucking, long-haul trucking. He drove for about a year, but didn't like being on the road by himself. So I went out and went to school and learned how to drive the big rig. And we went on the road together as a team and started driving explosives, high security items all over the United States, up into Alaska, Canada. We traveled for about 10 years before we retired.
What a remarkable 10-year experience on the road.
It was.
Did you always know that you were carrying explosives sometimes?
Oh, absolutely.
So when you went from the United States into Canada and up into Alaska, you must have seen not only changes with people and different attitudes, different cultures, but you must have seen something that was bothering people or changes that were occurring that bothered you. And you must have had some great conversations with your husband on those long trips.
Well, not only my husband, but there was a great array of people doing the same thing. I remember
as?
Drivers. There was a gentleman that was a pharmacist, and his wife was a nurse, and they were doing the same thing we were, teaming up and driving. Very interesting couple. There were all age groups on the road. It's a different lifestyle. It's a different opportunity, but you meet an awfully lot of people.
And I would imagine that you also hear many opinions, strong opinions, unsure opinions, but what you're doing is you're gathering from America, from Canada, from North America, feelings about what people have as to what's happening in their governments and their countries, among their populations. And what did you take away from that 10-year experience on the road? That's a rugged life for a woman in many ways.
Yes, it is. It's an interesting life, but there is an education period about it as well, because you see so many, not just people. You don't meet just the people. You see the circumstances of the different areas, from the nicest areas to the most poverty-stricken areas. You meet an awfully lot of people in a lot of different circumstances.
And that has to be a humbling experience for you.
Yes, it is.
Because you see differences. You feel differences. And you come back into your own country, into your own region. In this case, would it have been Northern Nevada? Would it have been California? Where did you come back to?
Northern Nevada.
Northern Nevada. And you're seeing there's got to be something more to this experience than driving a rig with my husband. There must be a purpose behind it. There must be reasons behind it. Is that true at all or not?
Well, I wanted to do some traveling. And there was a lot of the United States I hadn't seen. I had traveled the Orient a couple of times. I've been down into Mexico a couple of times. And to see the different lifestyles, the different opportunities people have in different areas.
Yes.
And they do differ depending on what area you're living in.
So let me ask you this. Out of all of this experience of work, of responsibility, of giving of yourself, how long ago did you arrive at your passion?
I can probably pinpoint the date pretty closely. It was 2008.
4 years?
4 years ago.
Okay.
We were looking at retirement. We had been involved in Southern California prior to going into the trucking business. My father, one of my stepfathers, was very, very active in the same area. And there was a responsibility there that once the children were raised and on their own, once we had the time and the opportunity, that it was time for us to give back, to get involved, and do what we needed to do.
And I'm going to hold you right there. We're going to return right after this commercial to find out exactly what that passion is. Thank you.
This episode of Women to Women is brought to you by Carpa Nevada LLC and Villa Basque Deli and Cafe.
Are you looking for a healthier lifestyle? A more nutritious diet? Do you care about quality? If your answer is yes, or if you are just curious, come into Villa Basque Deli and Cafe right here in Carson City, Nevada. Discover fine Portuguese extra virgin olive oils, vintage balsamic vinegars, and a wide assortment of international health teas provided by distributor Carpa Nevada LLC. In addition to these terrific items, Villa Basque is also the home of Pete's famous Basque chorizo, handmade on the premises from Pete's secret family recipe. Satisfy your culinary curiosities. Don't delay.
Welcome back. We're with our guest, Carol Howell, and we're just about to find out what her passion is. Carol has shared with us the various careers that she has worked through, some alone, some with her husband, and now we arrive at that point in time where a woman from Northern Nevada who's making a difference for all of us is going to reveal what that 4-year-old passion has been in her heart. What is that, Carol?
Well, it's getting involved. It's becoming part of the political process.
Mm-hmm.
I have a granddaughter and a grandson. I'm very, very concerned about what our country is going to look like for them. I was also raised in a period where my classmates, my brothers, were drafted and went into the service for 4 years and were required to serve their country.
My brother also.
I wasn't required to do that. So my husband served in the military. We have a lot of military friends. And I felt like in our retirement, I needed to do something to pay back for all the liberties and all the freedom I've enjoyed. So I've spent this past 4 years working with the political party of my choice and have been very involved.
So what is your capacity, Carol, right now within that political party?
I am second vice chair of the Carson City Republican Central Committee. I'm chair of the campaign committee for the Carson City Republican Women's Group. And right now, very, very active as chair for the committee that's planning the caucus for February 4th for the Republican Party here in Carson City.
So your plate is full.
Very full.
Very full. Before we get into that caucus and the education for all of us of what a caucus, the purpose of a caucus is, I just want to remind our viewers as well as myself that there are many of us who have had rich lives in terms of adventure, experience, success, and challenges. And one of the things that the American dream wants to encompass is a retirement period. And sometimes that can be a myth, sometimes it can be the truth. And you've chosen to give back your retirement years where you could be perhaps traveling again outside of the country or on a golf course, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But you personally have chosen to give back many, many years of retirement to those who have served in so many ways and to the liberties that you say you have enjoyed. And you want to continue those liberties for your children, your grandchildren, and for other people's children as well. So probably there's a question mark in many of our viewers' minds as to what is a caucus and the purpose of a caucus. Why is it so important?
Well, let's back up a little bit and start off with the fact that the caucus is not something new.
Right.
This has been going on since the early 1830s when we had our first caucus for president to nominate a presidential candidate. A caucus in itself is defined as a meeting of like-minded or politically same groups to discuss issues and select a candidate.
Okay.
It is a process very few of us understood a few years ago because it seems to change especially here in Nevada, it's gone back and forth between a presidential primary and a caucus. The end result is the same thing. Within the caucus, there is a presidential preference poll. Now, that's done to not particularly vote for a candidate. It is an indirect vote for that candidate to give them a percentage of the delegates that will go to the national convention for each party, and thereby nominate through a series of elections.
All right. Now, the caucus for Nevada is going to take place when?
On February 4th.
And where will that take place?
Well, at this point, let's be very, very clear so that all of your viewers understand that each county is responsible for their own interpretation and implementation of the rules. What Carson City can do with one location, Douglas can do in a couple of locations, but it's going to take multiple locations for Washoe. So each county has set up their own set of plans to implement the rules. Carson City's is going to be at 900 Mallory Street, Mallory Way. It's just in back of Lowe's Shopping Center. It will start at 7 o'clock in the morning, and with the precinct meeting doors opening at 7, so that we can allow for what we're calling a vote and go. For those people that are working and can't make the 3-hour period for the caucus and precinct meeting, we don't want to disenfranchise those voters.
Right.
Because you're talking doctors, you're talking first responders, police officers, waitresses. We are a gambling state. We have casinos that are open 24 hours a day. So we wanted to be able to include everybody and give everybody a chance to voice their preference for the presidential candidate.
So if I hear you correctly, the public is invited.
The Republican public is invited.
Okay.
On February 4th. The Democrats will have theirs on January 21st. This is a party-run, not a state-run event. The state does not pay for it. The parties pay for it. They're the ones that set up the rules, and they're the ones that implement the rules. So again, they will differ within each county.
So independents would not be able to attend either the Democratic caucus or the Republican caucus?
No, they are not.
All right. In the long run, your goal as chairperson and as implementer of the framework, your goal is to have what established? What do you keep focused on?
Having the smoothest, best run caucus we can possibly have. In 2008, a lot of people will remember, there were major problems.
Such as?
Not understanding the process. The planners at that time had normally had 30 people show up, 50 people show up for the county precinct meeting. They didn't know they were going to be inundated with 3,000 people.
My word.
At the same location. So they didn't have the supplies, they didn't have the check-in procedures down to accommodate those kinds of people in a 3-hour block. Now, Carson City in September, Nevada had a special election.
Yes, I remember.
We have, in Carson City, we have over 10,000 Republican voters. Over 50% of them turned out for that special election. Since this process on February 4th is going to be so important, we're expecting the same number and planning for 5,000 people to come through the doors and participate in all 3 activities, because there are 3 separate events taking place. There's the presidential, let me restate that, the presidential preference poll.
Okay.
where you come in and you vote.
Mm-hmm.
There is the caucus. That's the meeting of all of your neighbors. So that if you haven't decided who you want to vote for,
Mm-hmm.
you can come in and talk to your neighbors about it.
Mm-hmm.
Find out who they're supporting and why.
Mm-hmm.
If you've decided on a candidate and you want to come in and support that candidate, the caucus is where you do that. You get together with your neighbors and talk about why I'm supporting them, and you communicate with one another. At the end of that caucus period, we'll go right into the county precinct meeting. Now, that's held every 2 years. At the county precinct meeting, one of the most important things done there on an election year is to select delegates to go to the county convention, which will be on March 10th. At the county convention, their delegates are selected to go to the state convention. From the state convention, and by the way, that'll be on May 5th at John Swagas Nugget in Sparks. At that convention, the delegates are selected to go to national. Now, that's the importance of this whole process, this whole series of conventions. If you come in and let's say you're supporting candidate A, and candidate A gets 50% of the votes, they're going to get 50% of the delegates that are going to go to national. Now, this is statewide totals, of course.
Right.
We have 31 delegates from Nevada that will go to the nationals in Florida in the week of August 27th. Those 31 delegates will be bound by the preference polls results. So if
back here.
Right back here on February 4th, on the first vote at national. Now, if you've got candidate A and I want candidate B, candidate A gets 51% of the votes, but you don't get involved and go through the delegate process. When I get to when I get to national, I will vote my pledged 50% delegates to your candidate on the first vote only.
And after
that, I'm going to vote my conscience, which may not be your candidate. So it's important for supporters of all of the candidates to go to the national and not send just supporters of one candidate. Now, does this happen? It hasn't happened in 36 years because in 36 years we've known who was going to be our candidate by the time we got to that point. In this race, as close as several of these candidates are, this could be the first in 36 years that vote at the national that starts back here at the precinct is going to be vital.
Vital, yes. So what I hear you saying, bottom line, Carol, is that this is a very important national election.
Yes, it is.
And we're not a political spokes program for any one candidate or for any one party, but
I am.
Yes, you certainly are. You certainly are. So in your mind, the significance of this national election, the results of it are going to determine what for the future of this country?
Well, I'm one of those people that think that it's come down to a point on our economics in this country right now. We are near disaster with our deficit. We are with our debt. I think socially our liberties are being challenged every single day with the party that is in charge. They're being depleted. Our government has taken over such control of the government, and I know that sounds strange, but the government has gotten so big and so out of control, and interfering in our lives like they've never interfered before. And I fear for what our children may not know, and that they may not be able to enjoy the country I grew up in.
I have heard you say in past conversations, sometimes in contacts with larger groups, that the privileges or the opportunities, the advantages that you had growing up as a child are not available today to young people.
They're not.
I didn't misunderstand that.
No,
then.
you did not. My mother, with an 8th grade education, ended up owning 3 beauty shops, and out of sheer will and hard work. In today's society, we've lost that will. The government has gotten to the point that they're making so many people dependent on them and taking the whole work ethic out of our society that we've lost that in today's youth.
I remember one of the values that my parents kept instilling in me and my sister was that you can do almost anything that you want to do. Keep it legal. Okay, keep it legal, get an education, but even if you're not one of those college-bound students, you have a purpose, you have a desire, and I had a very strong work ethic, as did my sister, because it was role modeled for us with our parents and the extended family. So what you're saying is there is still within each one of us that determination to follow those great likes, great passions that we have in ourselves, and the creativity, the ingenuity, the desire to craft that, to make it become something that other people can also be evaluated into or brought into because it benefits them. You're afraid that that's disappearing.
I am. I've seen it disappear.
And
all across this country, it's disappearing. And you go into a city and you see the lines of people that are standing out looking for handouts instead of picking up a shovel if that's what it takes. I'll pick up the shovel and start shoveling a hole, and one day I'm going to be on that tractor and digging it with that big crane if I have to, if that's the way I have to go. We've lost that in this country, and I think that a lot of it has to do with our government.
Well, I appreciate sharing those thoughts because they're thought-provoking. It gives us a plate with ideas that you've expressed and put on that plate for us to really consider. And regardless of what party or what forum, we need to have those kinds of things brought forward to us. So I thank you very much for being with us, Carol.
Welcome.
And for those of our viewers who would like to know, is there a website or is there some information that they can go to become a part of this process?
Oh, absolutely. Carson City Central Committee has a website set up where they can not only go in and get the information on the caucus, the poll, and the precinct meeting, they can also pre-register this time so that all they have to do is bring in their picture ID, and they must have a picture ID to participate. But they'll have a receipt that they can get off of the website that says, I'm registered here at this address, and that address is www.ccrccgop.com. It stands for Carson City Republican Central Committee, grandoparty.com. And if they do pre-registering, that'll cut down on the wait to get checked in and to be able to vote.
Thank you, Carol, for that information.
You're
and for our
welcome.
viewers out there, you should be seeing this on our screen as well. So again, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Carpenter Nevada LLC of Carson City and Villa Bas Deli and Cafe, home of Pete's famous chorizo. And until we see you again next week, have a very good evening. Thank you.